and gentlemen, close your eyes for a moment and try to transport yourself back to a time when you stood in the presence of someone whose authority seems to completely cast a shadow over your very own being. Perhaps it was a teacher whose words carried the weight of centuries of knowledge, or a parent whose guidance looked like an unbreakable rule. In that moment, did you feel yourself becoming somewhat insecure, your voice faltering, as if in the presence of some invisible force? I am sure that at least once in your lifetime, each one of you has felt the weight of judgment coming from your own peers, where their opinions seem to somewhat shape your sense of self and yourself. It goes without saying that the opinions and judgments of those around us have a very significant impact on our opinions on the world and our perceptions of ourselves. And it is in these exact moments that we face the challenge of defining ourselves, but also maintaining this identity, despite this omnipresent pressure to conform and to fit the social standards. And that is the essence of power dynamics, because it is a dance of control, of influence, and of power that shapes our everyday interactions in the world. But what exactly lies at the heart of this power dynamics is a question we probably should ask ourselves. Well, are they a product of social constructs and social hierarchies, or perhaps they run deeper, rooted in our primal instincts for survival and belonging? Well, this is a question that has actually fascinated people for a very, very long time, yet the answer remains as ambiguous as ever. And that is because power dynamics are not static, they are not fixed entities. They change and shift with how people interact in the everyday world. And there are many examples that can actually illustrate that. What I want you to do now is to picture for a second the dynamics of a typical corporate world. The subtle cues of submission and dominance that play out into interactions between each one of its employees at all times. From the confident stride of the CEO to the nervous pitching of the intern, each person is very aware of their own place in this order, yet is trying to maintain this very delicate balance of asserting their authority and trying to achieve their own goals, while at the same time avoiding the dissatisfaction of those above them. But beneath all this professionalism lies a very complex web of hidden insecurities, desires and agendas that drive each person to assert their power in ways both subtle and more obvious. Now, of course, power dynamics are not confined to the realms of business or politics, but instead, they are actually present in each aspect of our lives, ranging from personal relationships to interactions with strangers on the street every day. And in order to visualize that, we can consider the aspect of a romantic relationship, where each time there is a disagreement, a compromise, these hidden power struggles play out. And in this case, who holds more power, or can we even define this? Perhaps this example actually shows us that power is not merely a tool for control or for domination, but rather this very fluid exchange of trust that shapes our interactions and that is meant to be exchanged between each one of us. As we delve deeper into this labyrinth of power dynamics, we begin to discover the very strong, but actually hidden forces that shape our interactions every day. And we begin to see that, again, power is not just a tool for control, but it can actually be a mirror that reflects our deepest desires, our deepest fears, and our insecurities. But power is not inherently good or bad. It is rather a neutral force that can be wielded for both positive and negative ends. Because at its core, power is simply the ability to influence, the ability to affect change. It is a tool that can be used for both constructive and destructive purposes. And perhaps that is the reason why it is desired by so many people. But power does not define us. We are not obliged in any way to crave it or to chase after it. And in fact, perhaps the more powerful thing in the nowadays world would be to actually abandon this very ruthless chase for power and for validation and for authority and focus on our own lives, quitting this need to constantly gain social validation and acceptance. Why, if that's the case, is power still so significant? Why do we still feel its effects on our lives? Why do we still fear it in some way? Well, I believe that is due to the fact that we interpret it in our own ways. And these interpretations shape the manifestations of power in the world. And what I mean by that is that power can have many faces, depending on how we approach it. Because on the one hand, power can become a weapon of oppression, crushing the voices and freedoms of others. But on the other hand, when we approach it with this dose of empathy and compassion, power can actually become a force for liberation and empowerment, uplifting those who come in contact with it. This is why power is just not universal. It is something that shifts, it is something that changes, and this is why we should probably try our best to not follow it very directly. But I think the most insidious aspect of power dynamics is actually the way in which they reinforce this idea of these very fixed roles in the society, these predetermined hierarchies that dictate who should belong where. So from a very young age, we are introduced to the very subtle ideas of where we belong and who we should be. These norms dictate basically who should be in power and who should submit. And the point I'm trying to make here is that from a very young age, we are taught to conform to these norms. We are taught to just accept who we are in a way that we should accept our place in the hierarchy. But this can lead to this sense of powerlessness. This can lead to this limitation of our potential, because we feel that we should occupy only a certain position, that we should achieve only a certain level of success, which may not entirely be true. Now, if you have ever felt boxed in by the expectations of others or by these social norms, you know exactly what it feels like. If I were to put it in an artistic, poetic way, I would say it feels like navigating through this dense fog where the path ahead seems somewhat blurred. Because we start to believe that change is impossible, and that our destiny is basically, predetermined by how others perceive us, not how we ourselves want to express ourselves. But what if I told you that these limitations are actually just figments of our imagination? Today, I would like to redefine with my speech your understanding of power dynamics, because ultimately, these are not some immutable laws of nature, but rather social constructs that are just maintained by our own human beliefs and our behaviors. This is why we are not obliged to follow them. This is why we are not constrained by them. But the key issue in this case is the fact that we are very social creatures. And we care deeply about what others think about us. We care deeply how others perceive us and whether they actually agree with where we are, whether they are completely against it. But in this chase, we really sometimes fail to recognize that we same individuals whose power we perceive, whose judgments we fear, they are humans too. And they are imperfect, they are human, they too grapple with their own insecurities and their own uncertainties, and they face the complexities of life with the very same vulnerability that we do. We try to gain their validation, we elevate them to this pedestal of authority, we assign them with this aura of superiority, and we forget that they are not immune to the very same human limitations that we face. That they are subject to the very same biases, very same judgments, very same expectations that shape their lives. But true authority should not stem from external validation. That is because, as we have managed to establish, power dynamics are never static. So we can never create this stable sense of self if we really depend only on external validation. And that is actually why true authority, true confidence stems from within. It stems from this unwavering sense of authenticity, of self-awareness that transcends any judgments and any opinions of others. And this is exactly what we should rely on. We should recognize that our worth does not come from what others think about us, that does not come from someone else's authority, but instead it is shaped by the deepness of our connections with other people, by the richness of our experiences, and finally, by the potential that lies within each and one of us. Now, ultimately, we have to recognize that the power to change lies within each and one of us, and actually, through these efforts, through recognizing our own self-worth and the nature of power dynamics, the fact that they are not static, we may try to create communities that are more inclusive, that care deeply about the differences, that appreciate those differences differences and appreciate uniqueness in our society. Because in the end, the power to change lies within each and one of us.